Second part. It's been a few minutes. I had to start the upload process, otherwise I probably wouldn't do it. So let's see here. That's one method to the madness. It happens to have a basic carbon capture of algae. There we go. And moss designs. Because, like, that's a bunch of carbon. Get over here, you succulent bastards. That's oil and carbon. I'm going to fucking transform you with a little bit of help from tiny little biological machines that already do the work for us. Anyways, who cares? With a little bit of heat and light, they work. So I figured, why would I waste my time trying to create a chemical big vat boy process when I can just make little tiny things do the work for me? Sure, it takes a month, but you know, so does like chemical distilling and drilling and moving it around and blah 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 blah. So I don't really see the problem. All right. So, let's see here. Hybrid biological pyrolysis concept is now on YouTube. Which one would be... Oh, right. We got the carbon capture at the source of the creation of the fuel, distribution taken care of. Let's get into hyper-efficient engine upgrades and concept for just a hyper-efficient engine. All right, basic boy stuff. Basics. Already done, already talked about, known that they work. Just got to put them together. All right. Give it a second. You're gonna, wormhole that together somehow. All right. We're going to go with upgrades first. Okay? Upgrades are simple. This is the secondary process to fixing the American and most of the world's energy crisis. Okay, just so you understand, I'm doing an accent quite clearly. Now, we need a cash for clunkers program that instead of breaking it down and trying to use a whole bunch of energy and all this other stuff to get rid of these perfectly functional vehicles, I'm going to make them more efficient. And thus, as a result, while making it more efficient, reduce our energy demand for our carbon economy. It's a two-pronged approach on that one. Big boys, here we go. All right. So, the basic process is a vacuum and insulated exhaust into intake manifold, exhaust manifold design that straps itself in and creates a pressurized system in the intake exhaust manifold that is going to utilize that pressure in a bleeder system with a plasma injector system which is literally just spark plugs, a diaphragm, and a electromagnetic coil. And it's a plasma injector all of a sudden. It will work pretty cheap and easy to manufacture, so I figured, why not? They work very, very well for what they are. They are extremely easy to produce, and that's just throwing a spark into the engine. It's like, why would you need that? And it's like, because we're going to use that bleeder system to run a double turbine that is going to take a regular turbine. Let's go with 30 millimeter, turbine on a turbo, and then we're going to stick onto it a 60 millimeter exhaust turbine, that is, and we're going to counter rotate it with a gear that goes into an axle that then has a teardrop shape on the 60 that then is, like any other fans, has 4 connecting areas. While that happens to also reduce the We're going to have it kind of go up and then kind of go back in. We're not quite finished yet. We have thermophotovoltaic and thermoelectric generating materials. They're not terribly cheap, if I'm being honest. That's kind of the caveat to that. But when we're talking about like an upgrade for the entirety of America's whole economy here, it's a worthwhile investment. We're talking about an investment and reduction of our energy demands, which is a very significant investment, but not as much over time. In fact, pretty short term, you'll get it back. That's the benefit of this design. And now you have a bunch of minerals that just need to be manufactured into those thermoelectric generating materials and thermophotovoltaic materials, which will be cooled before they go into your catalytic converter, which, before we get all up in arms, I'm going to need to step by step break it down. Stab with a pen. We're going to stab at the paper. So, first, we're going to talk about the exhaust recirculating and plasma creating with diesel. Hold your horses. How do you spell it? It's diesel. Oh, it's diesel. Okay. Diesel injector for water injection. That's right. So, that's number one. We're going to talk about that first before we get anywhere else. So, hold your horses. We already have water injection. I'm not putting anything other than water into this. So, shush. It's literally just water. But you said you had a plasma creating thing. Yes. Separate, comma, with the diesel injector. These are the upgrades. So the exhaust we're going to talk about first. Okay. That is oh my God. Why would we vacuum seal and insulate our exhaust and then put it into our intakes? And I'm like, I could see why you're stupid, but let me educate you so you're not. Be quiet. Pipe down, child that is getting learned from the teacher, professor person. And but an exhaust recycling, we already know about that. But you don't know. Okay. So an exhaust recycler is not necessarily great for anything other than diesel. Okay. So diesel, we're going to have that recycle outwards to the intake manifold, which we'll have for that, which this is going to be a long one. So strap in. We're going to describe this piece by piece, and this will probably be one video. So deal with it. Now, that is going to go into the intake. It has a round donut intake area, which has heart valves. 4 valves. As the exhaust comes in, it opens, but we're already going to have valves that also yank it back. So that way it's closed and it doesn't go into your intake manifold. That happens to have that's right, you guessed it, vacuum insulator. Yeah, woo, vacuum insulator with insulated material. Oh my God, wow, what about our valves that are dying? And I'm like, yes, no, hold your horses. It's getting water injected into the ports there together with the exhaust. We are also in that intake area, which is also our exhaust area, which is also recycling our exhaust into that exhaust area, have magnetrons. Magnetrons? What the fuck? Magnetrons? Yes, shh. Magnetrons are easy, simple ubiquitous. You can find them in landfills like crazy. They're almost everywhere. People throw out their microwaves all the time, so like it's pretty easy to find magnetron. But we're not going to try and create plasma. Sorry, diesel, no plasma. We don't make plasma with diesel. We don't want to make plasma. We want to break down the particulate matter, because this is a different design than the gasoline engine. Okay, so as it goes in, the magnetrons are placed in a phase array where is the wave, and so you have pockets of emptiness, no pockets of emptiness any longer. They are then going to interact in an entanglement type of fashion, but not really entanglement. It's one of those like catch-22s. It's really just sort of like jiggling around next to itself, potentiating itself in a resonance frequency, man. Now, what that means is, as the exhaust comes through, it dumps all of that resonance frequency into the exhaust as it goes into the intake. Hold your horses. There's another exhaust area that I'll get to that is going to be where our bleeder system is, but it's going to take the majority of our steam and heat, which actually isn't much. We don't want that heat to be brought back in, or that lack of heat, really, that cold to be brought back in. We want to maintain heats and temperatures. So hold your horses. Now, that just adds pressure because there's already some steam there that will quickly rise up to temperature, and then we're going to drop it with the extremely high temperature magnetron area, which is going to send it into our intake, which is then going to be further reduced in temperature as it's sucking in air with water, but not lots of water, just water. It is literally only water. There is no other things than water. I have to scream that because people are like, water meth. No, water. Just H2O. The water decomposes. It's hot enough with that magnetron area and the resulted extra steam that was already fairly hot, but then really hot. Now it's going to get dropped in. Now the particles, the particulate matter of just the diesel that didn't burn, decomposes H2O to HNO, which now reacts very vigorously with your carbon-rich little tiny nanoparticles, exothermically reacting as it intakes, forcing it down faster from the entirety of that exhaust manifold, which, of course, by the way, has the heart valves, which are like, no. You don't come into my intake. Okay, shush. Okay, shut up. No. I'm insulated. I'm sealed. Get the hell out of here. Along with all the other places that are, by the way, you can't get in here. My valves aren't open. No pass, bitch. The password over here is clearly open, so there is where you're going to go. Plus, it's directed. We have valves. Valves that effectively mean it only goes there. Just in case they ever leaked, the ports over there, they're not really open. So, there you go. Now, as it exothermically reacts, it's going to go in. Now, it's still quite warm, but it doesn't matter to me because I don't really care. It's a diesel. They're usually pretty warm anyways. The valves close. Ports are closed. Water and coolants and oils are still going to go through. Still going to cool the damn fucking port regardless. And, oh, what do you know? I have this second diesel injector that's literally just for water. Only water! Water only. Stop it with the extra things. Just water. Just water is going in. Magnetron land is highly inefficient, by the way. So that means I capture the vast majority of that excess electromagnetic field garbage that isn't being used into glow plug land, which is an exhaust manifold area. Give it a second. As it compresses, again, what shock face? Water. Water. Just fucking water. Just use water. Only water. Stab, stab, stab. Water. We are injecting water into it. That produces steam. It reduces the heat. It goes through another power cycle because there's pressure. Even though the heat has dropped, the increase of density for the given exhaust has increased, making more pressure, making another third power stroke and cycle. It now is getting exhausted. By the way, those camshafts have to be ground in a very particular order for the lobes to basically time themselves for the intake and the exhaust to do this appropriately, or using my hydraulic ram free valve setup, which is far easier in all aspects. It's just a hydraulic ram with like actuations. Way easier. Free valves, why aren't we using it on everything? Makes no sense. It's literally just a program for like, if the depletion the cylinder, it goes this duration for throttle input in, height of lift. It's not hard to do it. But like, whatever. Point is, that means it opens it up for the exhaust. The exhaust is fully... now it goes into manifold land, which has glow plugs, which are releasing radio waves, microwaves, not very much, but they're a little bit there, and IR. What? Yeah, no, IR. So we're just going to capture those electromagnetics, and we're going to reflect the vast majority of the IR that is still kind of there, essentially into areas of concentration that mean we're going to send it for cooling for our radiator because we kind of need to do it. So that is a very efficient design. Now, as it goes into exhaust manifold, that's not our bleeder system. That goes into the intake, which is the exhaust now. That's right. That's the exhaust that is actually now our intake. That manifold has pressure. That pressure then goes into there. It got heated up while we were waiting for it to intake in another place. Then it sent it over there, which we can now add a little bit of water to gain a little bit more energy out of that system. But it's mostly very cold in comparison. And that's where that... Oh, remember that me saying that there's this other, thing before about like this colder but still pretty high pressure exhaust that we're going to mostly bleed out of the system? It's like that's where that goes. That's the bleeder. That's got heart valves for 4 systems because you have your intake on both sides of a V8, let's say, diesel, and then you have your 2 exhausts, which you're looking for. Doesn't work. Now that has those heart valves equaling 2 headers. They will always constantly be bleeding, but they still have some pulsy kind of scenarios that occur. Somewhat. Now what does that mean? Because it's like, how do you get it around? And I'm like, intake. The intake is, that's an intake, but this now is actually the exhaust. So the exhaust goes in, the valve open, over here it takes most of the steam, but some of it goes in. I get extra pressure pulse into the intake of another place that is now hot there than over here, but the majority of the steam cold, but the pressure is increased and maintained, which is a very specific setup here, because you have it pulling, which is actually going to push open, and then which is the up, and then it pulls, and then it goes down. Simple stuff. And then you have the right angle and left angle, so you have 4 different actuation points that do this for your camshaft. Now, simple, easy stuff. That's going to go into, why do we have 4 heart valves that open up? What is why? Efficiency. Equaling tube headers are great, but it will still try and move backwards into the tube. So the heart valve stops this. That will then go into your turbine, which is a double turbine. Just like I talked about, we have a larger one. It's going to be insulated. I kind of briefly touched on it, really. But it's going to be insulated. That little piece that we have to machine out in to get into the axle then make that rotating counter rotation, because the pulse ultimately means there's a high pressure after that will counter rotate, that'll have a lower pressure that is then getting sent in after, which makes it more efficient. And because it's larger, because there's less overall pressure and heat, and we're going to insulate the surrounding turbine area housing, and we need them to have like the ability to handle the heat. So then we're going to stick the axle basically through that to a compressor with a firewall, more or less, that is then attached to a pulley system and an electric motor, which is a generator / electric motor combo. They can be used either way, which is more or less just an alternator, if we're being honest. So that way the supercharger aspect can pump a large amount of air with the a little bit of batteries here to offset and remove some of that parasitic loss in the startup process, and then it starts heating up, gaining us the heat pressure manifold system that continuously adds that efficiency back into work motion for our diesel. The turbine will still add compressed air that will be added in with the hydrocarbons during those normal diesel stroke processes, which maintains the efficiency of heat and pressure in the system. That's why this is so efficient. That's why it's so good. That's why it works so well. And effectively, that's now just a generator for the magnetrons back to the same thermoelectric and thermophotovoltaic radiator with coolant around that area, because it recycled itself several times. There is carbon dioxide, lower NOx, in fact, almost none, and lower CO, in fact, almost none. Guarantee that, because that's kind of their whole system to remove it. Just now it's made better and makes energy for us, which is the whole point of it. And then that also helps increase the amount of air, which helps cool it off slightly. You know, those ports are now no longer as fucked as you thought. And what do you know? Now we have a diesel that is 4 power strokes. 4. And for the efficiency that we put in for the magnetron, because we're adding in those waters, we gained an advantage each time, along with the exothermic breakdown with that heat and the water breaking down and helping break down once decomposition occurs during that intake, which is now actually a power stroke. So we have 1 stroke power stroke never-endingly for our diesel, with maintaining our pressure occurring. It's some valves, it's some so on, but it works very well. It's very, very efficient. It's highly legal in all the ways, because it reduces, and in fact, by the time it goes to our catalytic, which you don't really need a catalytic converter, but you can send it to because it's a diesel and it removed all harmful particulates, so practically, I mean, it's not going to be any better with a catalytic converter. But the point is, it's remarkably more efficient. It makes more power for the remarkably less fuel. And it's a 1-stroke power stroke every time. Almost like a Stirling engine. And that electricity from the thermoelectric, thermophotovoltaic, which are pretty efficient, like 9 to 12% efficiency for some of the thermoelectric generating. Now the 40% is the thermophotovoltaic, and I'm cooling it with the radiator. So it's still pretty efficient. I got a turbine that's also making electricity. Magnetrons are taken care of. That magnetron efficiency goes back into glow plugs for exhaust manifold, which of course gains us back some of that energy lost. And now you know why this was going to be an entire video in and of itself, just for the exhaust recirculating diesel injector that's just for water injection system. Give me 1 second.